Hello, I literally am God, and so I'm actually very special. Because I'm God, I am telepathic. I can read all the thoughts of all the humans as if I created the human race. I understand insecurity, schadenfreude, evil, the plots of people against each other. I know what everyone's thinking. I never really expect these videos to blow up. Um, the speech I made, which was an improvisation on sexuality and civilization's problems, ironically, is at over 8,000 views and approaching 30 likes. Now, I listened to it after it blew up, and I, in the description, amended any information that might have been slightly inaccurate. Alright? So, I exist to turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending, and I'm also telepathic. And so basically, I also am correct theology. Correcting that sentence, I also am theologically correct. In other words, the truth is non-benevolent deism. This is the correct theological point of view, which I've explained in some of my videos. Okay? Now, humans are insecure, and they also have ego problems. And so many humans try to, based on their worldview and based on their model of the external universe around them, including other humans, put people in boxes and then, sort of like, close someone off as to like, this is what this person is. No one can close me off as to what I am. And so this is what I am. All right, unapologetically. I am a 6 foot, 3.5 inch, no shoes on, no hair on top of my head, light skin or mixed, brown male. I have both black and white genetics. The black genetics are going to make my nose thick, my lips thick, and my hair texture somewhat curly. All right? And then I'm a grower. And so when I'm flaccid and warm and hydrated and relaxed, my flaccid size is going to range between 5 and 5.5 inches, completely unaroused. Now, if it's freezing and homeostasis is reducing blood flow to extremities, all right, I could be 4 inches if I'm freezing and flaccid. All right? But then, the commonly accepted metric for peak male erect size is the bone pressed erect length, or BPEL. And so basically, this is measured from the top. From the top, you're going to compress the fat pad to the bone and then measure to the termination of glands or head. And so basically, I've done this, and without question, my maximum BPEL reaches at least 8.5. In other words, compressing the fat pad to bone and then going to where my glands or head terminates reaches at least 8.5 inches. At times I've seen it over 8.5, maybe 8.6, 8.7, and so on and so forth. Therefore, if I were to provide my BPEL to a single digit, I would say approximately 9 inches bone pressed, because you round up once you're over 8.5. All right? And so that is my peak. Okay? And so why in the heavens is bone pressed? How did that become the metric for male erect size? It became the metric because basically during insertion, during practical intercourse, the male fat pad can compress to bone during maximal insertion during intercourse. And so the entire bone pressed length is functional insertable length. And so during intercourse, maximal insertion involves compression of the male fat pad to bone. All right? And so on and so forth. Now, the hat that the universe gave me is ironically similar to Abraham Lincoln. And then I have this speech that is blown up about me addressing civilization's problems and so on. And so something very, very ironic is going on here. But the purpose of this channel is my attempt to turn a hopeless, broken mess into a happy ending. Okay? Now, ultimately, um, I believe a typical size 5 soccer ball, or internationally football, when pumped up maximally, is going to be maybe at least 8.6 inches in sort of diameter, all right? And so basically, at times I've done a bone press measurement, and I see that I'm reaching around 8.6, all right? And so by irony, all right, my peak bone press is at least a pumped up size 5 soccer ball, all right? So I'm a soccer ball, all right? But a size 5 soccer ball. And so I'm therefore not the largest a woman could find if she wanted only size. But the point of this channel is to turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending. For the purity of love to come back, relationships cannot be based on solely sexual things. There must be intellectual profundity, emotional compatibility, personality compatibility. Okay? If a woman wanted only size, she could mold or manufacture a dildo to her specifications, attach it to an electronically programmable robot where the stroke frequency is programmable, and have intercourse with that. All right? Human connection and love goes many levels above sexuality, okay, for it to actually last. So Will and Ariel Durant is an example of a marriage that's actually lasted, right? And so basically, um, they wrote the story of civilization, which is a sequence of about 11 novels detailing the history of human civilization. All right. Now, all the consciences that sort of want me to sort of fail, right? Um, my speech on sexuality, where I discuss my peak size, has already blown up to over 8,000 views, and then approaching 30 likes, with the description containing amendments of any inaccurate claims in the speech. And so this is all going somewhere, irreversibly now. And so I plan to cleanse the earth in my passing, resolve it of its impurity, because it's gone to shit. Anyway, now, so on and so forth. And so, basically, it ultimately, I sort of conjecture about temperature, hotter temperatures in sub-Saharan Africa, leading to superior blood flow to the genitalia over generations during puberty and so on, leading to emergent, over time, larger than average size of African genetic origin men. However, this does not have much sort of support in the scientific community. The more plausible thing is the life history theory, where basically there was high pathogen exposure and mortality in sub-Saharan Africa, and that led to selection pressures favoring males with high testosterone, who are more endowed, and females with high fertility or estradiol, who will have larger breasts and backside. And so on average, the African origin woman will have larger breasts and backside. And then the African men will be slightly more on average in terms of bone pressed erect length peak. But then there are white anomalies, such as Matt Barr, who is the world record holder for size, even though a white British male. And so testosterone exposure during fetal development, and then also testosterone exposure during fetal development, and then also genetics can produce very endowed white males. Okay? Now, everything on this planet, males, tend to exaggerate everything. And so when I say my height is 6'3.5" I mean without shoes and no hair on top of my head. All right. For reference, a guy who is shorter than me has been telling people he is 6'5" for a while. Okay. Now, in the past, in jest, because everything is exaggerated, I said that my dick was 10 inches. Okay. But the truth is, my peak bone press is going to touch at least 8.5 inches. All right. Over 8.5 at peak. All right. In terms of functional insertable bone press direct length. Okay. And so, ultimately, everything is exaggerated. For example, moderately popular black porn star Anton Harden is quite short, only 5'7", with kind of skinny legs. And you can ask Grok to, based on the internet containing frame estimates, where the Reddit analysis community does estimates of the actor's true bone press with no exaggeration. And so if you ask Grok to analyze the internet for Anton Harden what his true unexaggerated bone press direct length is, Grok is going to tell you that Anton is actually 5'7", kind of skinny, and then his bone press is really about 8.5. My bone press is also at least 8.5. However, the structure of Anton is that I believe he is moderately wide, and so I believe that potentially Anton Harden is potentially a little bit wider than myself, and so on. All right. And so, interestingly, however, all right, a moderate percentage of high girth pornographic actors are actually enhanced with dermal filler, which is an injection to increase thickness, with pumping with a vacuum pump to enhance thickness. And some of them went to a Los Angeles surgeon for implants to enhance size. Some of them, the girth is natural, and so on and so forth. And so, with humility, Anton Harden could be a little bit wider than me, and so on. Anyway, I'm just trying to find the truth. And so basically, um, um, and so you're going to have sort of also black males that are not thick. There's Hollywood Cash, who is extremely thin, even though green lighted on Blackster.com. And so I am actually thicker than Hollywood Cash. All right, so Hollywood Cash has been approved to be a porn star on Blackster.com. I'm thicker than Hollywood Cash. All right, anyway. And then now there's Matt Barr, who's white and like larger than all black porn stars. All right, anyway. Anyway, and so when you're Anton and you're 5'7" and you're like an 8.5 bone press, the exaggerated porn star material is going to say Anton Harden, 11 inches. All right. And so I'm 6'3.5", barefoot, no hair on top of my head. My bone press peak is going to be 8.5 or more. All right. I've seen myself over 8.5 in measurements in terms of bone press from the top. All right. And in the past, I said I was 10 inches. All right. And so realistically, if I were a male porn star, my exaggeration would be at least 11 inches. Okay. Anyway, and so on. Now, so Anton is like 5'7" with a 8.5 bone press, and he's kind of wide. Hollywood Cash is really thin. I'm thicker than Hollywood Cash. And then Julio was pretty much the biggest. And so similarly, all right, you could ask Grok, what is Julio's real BPEL? It's going to say, scouring all the Reddit frame analysis sections, around 9.5. All right. And so my peak is over 8.5. Julio's is maybe around 9.5. All right. And so basically, how in the heavens do the Reddit people estimate on exaggerated bone press? In certain frames, you can have a reference object for estimation. For example, a human male thumb in width may be approximately 1 inch, depending on genetics and thickness of fingers. Some people will have genetically thicker fingers, some will have thinner fingers. And so basically, um, there's so in the case of myself, the width of my thumb is slightly less than 1 inch. For someone with slightly thicker genetic fingers, the width of their thumb may be precisely 1 inch. And so in a scene that Julio or Brake did with Abby Love, he's on the bed with legs spread, with holding his dick with his thumb as a reference object for measurement. And so, if you assess increments of his thumb roughly, all right, my thumb width is slightly less than 1 inch. All right, he could have genetically slightly thicker fingers. Let's say his thumb width is also slightly less than 1 inch or about 1 inch. You do increments of those thumbs properly, you'll realize why the estimate of Julio on exaggerated is 9.5 bone pressed. All right. Further, if you inspect the structure of Julio's dick, there actually seems to be some odd kind of pelvic detachment at the base of his dick. In other words, at the base of his dick, you can see 1 inch or more of some detached deformation. All right. And so people have observed that this looks like some sort of pelvic detachment to extend length. All right. Because you don't see a weird deformation at base of dick on normal guys. Right. And so it's thought that this could have been a ligament cut to extend length for pornographic effect, or because his sickle cell anemia and sort of priapism health condition caused some kind of naturally occurring pelvic detachment extending that length, given a sort of a compromised suspensory ligament, given damage from his health condition. All right. And so Julio, as well, his height on his profiles, they'd say 6 foot, but barefoot, no hair on top of his head, he's more so in the 5'10" to 5'11" range. Similarly, if people saw me walking around with shoes with hair on top of my head, they would say I was at least 6'5". All right. My barefoot with no hair on top of my head is only 6'3.5". All right. And so on. Now, Julio was thought to have natural girth because of genetics, but then also because he basically had sickle cell anemia and priapism causing swollen tissue. He was also thought to pump for his scenes. All right. And so basically, as per the description of the sexuality video, the rough parameterization of myself versus Brake is myself being 6'3.5", a mixed light-skinned brown guy with a thick nose and thick lips. When flaccid, I'll be 5 to 5.5. If I'm freezing and flaccid, I could be 4. My peak bone press will be 8.5 or more. I'll be at least 6 inches shaft girth circumference, and then I'll approach 7 inches girth circumference around my glans or head. Then Julio is going to be maybe 5'10" or 5'11" barefoot. All right, being nice to him, in estimation, up to 9.5 bone press, but that sort of odd sort of pelvic detachment area at base of dick is included in the visual perception of him reaching a 9.5. And then basically a slightly thicker shaft, 6.5 to 6.75 on pump shaft girth. And then, however, thinner head. And so his glans is actually smaller than shaft. And so I have a thicker head or glans than he does. Anyway, so on and so forth. Now, I know this is true because I actually have a scaled picture between myself and Julio or Brake that is correct. And so basically, I found a frame of Julio kneeling performing insertion, and then I have my own standing pictures. I have a standing picture where I'm turned to the side and maximally erect. And so, basically, when Julio is performing insertion, he may tend to compress. That pelvic detachment area at base of dick may tend to compress a little bit. And so, basically, I went ahead and scaled my picture of myself standing and Julio kneeling performing insertion for a sort of appropriate visual comparison. And so I made the size of our heads based on the distance from back of neck to nose the same. And I made the width of the thigh nearest to the camera the same. And so in that picture, which is roughly to scale, and I'm taller and so my torso is longer and so on, you can see that we look highly comparable. And so Julio, his pelvic detachment section may be compressing, and then myself is standing up and erect. And so I analyzed that image, and so based on that image, from where dick is starting at body to termination of head or glans, I appear to interestingly be at least 97% of his length. And then in that image as well, I interestingly appear to be at least 92% of his shaft girth circumference. But then he would have smaller head or glans than I do, and I have much larger head or glans. And so on and so forth. And so this image is proof of me being close to break, and I actually have an OnlyFans with a few fans, even a fan that is alike to that picture, that is to scale with myself and break. Now, I'm at a point now where I'm godlike in terms of, a level of naivety, where I'm not naive at all. I understand like majority of things as to what people are doing. And so basically, basically, there's the following, which is for a male to be sexually performant or maintain his peak size during practical sex requiring standing up or exertion of some kind, many things need to be perfect. Leg strength needs to be perfect. Core strength needs to be perfect. Cardiovascular health needs to be perfect. And as well, your pelvic floor strength needs to be perfect. The pelvic floor being strong helps trap blood when you're standing up to, maintain peak erections when standing and so on. And of course you need to be aroused by your partner. And so in my standing picture, I look very close to Julio. I'm healthy, fit, my legs are strong, my core is strong, my cardio is strong, my pelvic floor is strong, and I'm standing up at roughly peak size. All right? And so that picture is a representation of me when I'm 100% healthy. Now, the first time I had intercourse, I wasn't in the best shape. I was sexually naive. I didn't know how to maintain peak size or what I was doing. And so the first time I had intercourse was not very good. The second time I had intercourse was with a woman 11 years older than me, 35 years old, maybe 5'9" or 5'10", 160 pounds, white and Norwegian, flat like a board on top, but very large backside. Probably a good chunk of her body weight was just her backside. And so upon completion of this session, I asked the question, how many times did you orgasm? And her consciousness told me, I don't know, it was like 4 times and my legs were shaking. Okay? And then she said twice on the floor, and then she said twice on the couch. Right? Now, ironically, again, I have very thick head or glans. And so I was sitting down on the couch roughly fully erect, and she is sort of trying to mount me in reverse cowgirl, facing away from me with a very large backside. And so basically, for like over 5 seconds or something, she's sitting down on the head of my dick with her whole body weight, and it's too thick to even fit inside of her. And so she then gets off it and then applies some lube, and then it goes in. And so often if I'm like actually at my peak size, I may be even too large for initial insertion and so on. The picture with myself and break to scale is actually to scale. Anyway, and so break would get exaggerated to 14 inches, but his bone press was really about 9.5, and his height was exaggerated to 6 foot, but barefoot with no hair on his head. He's more like 5'10 or 5'11, really, being nice to him. And so the picture with myself and him is to scale, and so on and so forth. Now, now there's the following, which is basically the following, which is basically the following, which is basically yet another time I had intercourse. Same woman. She starts bleeding. She says, "I'm bleeding." And so I stop and I pull out. There's blood on the head of my dick. Okay? She cleans up the blood and then is complicit in continuing the sex. And so basically, then we continue having intercourse. Ultimately, the female body structure is the following, right? Basically, female vaginal depth or accommodation is going to vary. And so some women will be small, and then some women will be larger. And so when a female human becomes aroused, where the cervix is, inside the vagina will elongate. And so some women, when they're maximally aroused, the cervix is going to be 6 inches deep inside the vagina. Some women, when they're aroused, their cervix will be 8 inches deep inside the vagina. Even for women that are taller than average, like a 5'9" or 5'10" woman, the maximum depth of cervix inside vagina, when aroused, realistically doesn't exceed 8 inches, right? And so this woman might have been 5'9" or 5'10", all right? And so you could, larger or taller women, there's ultimately variance in female vaginal size. And so if a woman is like, in general, just a larger or taller woman, then this may have some correlation with, increased vaginal accommodation or depth or size, all right? But really, even for taller women, the maximum depth of cervix inside vagina, when maximally aroused or elongated, is only 8 inches deep. All right, some of them could be a bit more than that, but really, even taller women, larger women, the maximum depth of cervix when they're aroused will really maximally be 8 inches inside. And so, for myself, who has a peak bone press from top insertable length of over 8.5 inches, all right, I've seen a 8.6, 8.7. Long story short, my peak will lie between 8.5 and 9, all right? That means that even for taller women, I'm going to hit cervix, all right, and so on. And so basically, by variance and non-benevolent evolution, I am lucky in that I can fill a woman. Anyway, and so basically, yet another time with this older woman with the bleeding, right? I reach roughly peak size inside of her, and I'm going full throttle. She starts saying, "Oh my God," right? And then basically, I reach peak size and I see her clench her ass and scream, whip her head around and look at me with wide eyes. And then I pull out and a blob of blood comes out of her vagina. All right. And so I got an "oh my God" out of her. and then there was some internal bleeding, so I pull out, then blood comes out, blob of blood comes out of her. And so she explained that she's not losing her virginity. She was not on her period, right? She said that with her vagina may tend to get tighter as it gets deeper. And so myself, with my size, and especially I have quite thick glands, slightly thicker glands than Shaft, applied pressure caused some internal bleeding and so on. Something to that effect is what occurred. All right. And then ultimately, at one point, if she screams and then pulls away and clenches her ass, looks at me with wide eyes, all right, ultimately hitting cervical areas is pleasurable, but also it could be painful, because when you hit the cervix, it could cause pain for the woman. Anyway, now there are going to be male consciousnesses that exist that are more than me at peak, all right? And so again, my peak bone press, zero exaggeration, will be over 8.5. And Julio's was estimated at around 9.5. All right? And so on and so forth. But again, visible pelvic detachment that's extending his length at base of his dick. All right? And so, ultimately, I've had many conversations with many women. And so I was at a strip club once, and there was a white woman with quite large breasts. And she said, I was once with a male who was 7 feet tall and 11 inches. And it was interesting. But my current partner is perhaps slightly over average. Now, average bone press in the US is 5.6, all right, when fully erect. My bone press peak of 8.5 or more is actually in the 99.9th percentile, all the way at the right end of the bell curve. And so basically, I am quite large, but I'm not the largest. Now, men ultimately tend to exaggerate everything. And so, was this man actually 7 feet tall, barefoot, no shoes, no hair on top of his head, with an unexaggerated bone press from the top of exactly 11 inches? Was he actually 7 foot and 11? Or are those heights and length measurements exaggerated? But long story short, I can't know whether this is the truth. This stripper said she was a white woman. She had larger breasts. She said, I was once with a man who was 7 feet tall and 11 inches. And it was interesting. But however, my current partner is perhaps slightly over average. All right. And so she said it didn't matter too much. She said that other things were important. And then she said that basically, if you have size, you can't think that size only is going to do it for you as a man. You have to know how to use it and actually have skill and so on. All right. Anyway, now, anyway, so anyway, yeah. And so basically, yeah. Anyway, now, in recent times, I actually fell very ill with a flu-like virus coming along with a high fever. And so the high fever went ahead and killed my body's hydration level, and then also killed my sperm count. And then I was really sick, and so I was low energy, low libido. Now, when a male human is suffering from a high fever and virus and is trying to attempt intercourse, they're usually going to have erectile dysfunction. And so the standing picture right very close to break was taken in health. And then, maybe weeks passed, and then I got sick, And then there was a quite limited window of opportunity for me to meet up with a woman I was interested in terms of when I could be in the area and when she could be in the area. And so in that window of opportunity, I was sick. And so because of my desire to see her, I ended up, seeing her when I was sick. And so the high fever and virus that my body was fighting was such that I had erectile dysfunction. And so by irony, I was nowhere near my peak size in that encounter. Then all the men would laugh at me and say I'm naive, I'm a 2-year-old, I'm stupid, because I'm telepathic. But I'm not naive, I'm just God and morally superior to all of you, and also telepathic. And so basically, it was interesting, but she still said she had at least 1 or 2 orgasms, even though I was tiny compared to my true peak size, which achieved when I'm healthy. Anyway, and so basically, um, so on and so forth. We had tried again in that window, but I still was not fully recovered. I was still under the weather, still probably not quite at peak. And then further, another aspect to being good at intercourse is the following. It is basically um, the following, which is sensitivity control and no premature ejaculation. And so basically, if you can pace yourself to control your sensitivity and avoid premature ejaculation, you can last longer and bring a woman to more orgasms before you yourself climax. And so the second time I had intercourse in my life, I lasted long enough without premature ejaculation for the female to say that she reached an orgasm count of 4 before I ultimately finished. And so I withstood her bouncing on me for a very long time, and I saw her stop and have a leg shaking orgasm and so on. But in my most recent time having intercourse, I was sick, probably not quite at my true peak when I'm healthy. I was kind of low energy, and my ability to regulate myself and no premature ejaculation, sensitivity control, it was just all kind of subpar. And so those experiences with me when sick may have left a bad taste in the female's mouth. But ultimately in Christian marriage commitment, there's the following, for better or for worse, for richer or for poor, and in sickness and in health, right? And so in health, this woman said that she had 4 orgasms with me. In health, this woman bled due to some kind of internal tear due to my size. In sickness, I was like way smaller and so on. And she might have said there's only 1 or 2 orgasms. In sickness, second time, probably not quite at peak, kind of weak, didn't last very long, sensitivity control, pacing myself, avoiding premature ejaculation, it's just kind of weak, kind of sick, kind of subpar. Anyway, anyway, so yeah. Anyway, and so ultimately, you should not marry a person based on solely sexual characteristics. And so a fellow I met said that he married the best ass he'd ever seen, but it didn't last very long because she was crazy. And so similarly, this is like a woman marrying one of the largest dicks she's had or felt, and then realizing that there's so much more to a relationship than just that. And for it to last and actually be profound and positive, it must have many other dimensions that are important. All right, intellectual compatibility, emotional compatibility, personality compatibility. All right, this, that, and the other. And so humans' attractiveness as well is also about facial attractiveness, aesthetics of body, fitness, and so on. And then a human could have many talents and so on. All right. Anyway. Now, I'm not a Christian, but I believe that the commitment in sickness and health from Christianity is important, and my experiences in life have illustrated why that is important. All right, when I'm really sick, I could have horrible erectile dysfunction. When I'm healthy, I could be very close to break, or Julio, as per that real image, which is the scale. Anyway, and so basically, um, um, and so basically, um, um, yeah, um, anyway, and so, anyway, um, yeah, and so the true theology is non-benevolent deism, and so I think in many of my videos I've illustrated what non-benevolent deism means, and so it involves belief in God but disbelief in benevolence, no prayer to anything, and that the universe is a machine that conserves energy, charge, and angular momentum, and that obviously the moral principles of the world's religions evolved for a reason, and these moral principles are good. Anyway, um, so on and so forth. And also belief that there is no proof of the afterlife, but when the brain is dying, it may visualize, things it loved, like loved ones, as a dying phenomenon, without necessarily implying that consciousness is going into heaven to be with your loved ones. Anyway, anyway, um, and so I'm a non-benevolent deist, but moral principles from Christianity, like commitment in times of sickness and in health, are important. Anyway, and so, um, anyway, um, anyway, anyway, um, anyway, so anyway, um, uh, anyway, um, so yeah, um, anyway, um, so anyway, um, and so ultimately there's sort of this thing about the universe where there are evolutionary matches for each other. And so I've seen a white woman who is not very tall and kind of flat like a board in terms of both breast and backside, right? With a white man who's not that tall, kind of skinny, and uh, you know, not very endowed in terms of peak erect size, but they're both intelligent, they're both intellectually compatible, emotionally compatible, and they've been together for a while, many years, like over 8 years married. And so basically, um, 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 yeah, and so basically, these guys are an evolutionary match for each other, right? Um, and so ultimately, I don't believe in superiority. I only believe in evolutionary matches. So there could be a woman who is not that tall, flat like a board in terms of both breast and backside, small vaginal accommodation, maybe a woman whose peak cervical depth is 6 inches. Then there could be a guy who's not that tall, kind of skinny, kind of a nerd, not that large in terms of peak bone press, and then they're good mates for each other and are intellectually compatible. For myself, um, who is actually quite endowed at peak, then my match could be a woman who is larger or taller with a lot with a larger backside. So, okay, and so I've ironically had intercourse mainly in terms of any kind of repeated partner with a woman who is larger, taller, 5'9" to 5'10", 160 pounds, flat on top, but very large backside. And so probably as well with larger, taller women, there's a slight correlation with sort of deeper vaginal size or accommodation. And so, but even for a larger, taller woman, again, depth of cervix will not exceed like 8 inches. when they're maximally aroused. And so if I have a peak bone press insertable of at least 8.5, meaning 8.5 or more of bone pressed insertable length at my peak size, then for that larger, taller woman, all right, who may be larger and have more vaginal accommodation, I fill her up to cervix, right? And so then my match could be larger woman, and other person's match who's not as endowed as me could be smaller woman. And so there's not this better or worse thing. Anyway, the whole point is to find someone who's a good fit for you so you won't be alone, which is difficult to do, but usually exists somewhere. Anyway, um, anyway, now non-benevolent deism also outlines the following, which is that ultimately nothing benevolent allows the variance that exists. Just evolution, mutation, natural selection, and so on allows variance in human attributes and experience. And so, because I'm telepathic, there are going to be insecure guys who want me to be a 5 at peak or a 4. But my peak bone press from the top with 0 exaggeration will be 8.5 or more. All right, over 8.5, which is like 99.9th percentile in the United States, all the way at the right end of the bell curve. Anyway, and so if you are 8.5 or more bone pressed at your peak, you're in the 99.9th percentile, all the way at the right end of the bell curve in the United States. So that's what I am. Anyway, so I'm telepathic, and I'm also God, meant to turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending. When you're a taller man, your size for your height or body size may not look especially large. And so the picture to scale of myself and Break, I'm taller than Break, right? But it's to scale, and our dicks look, similar in terms of, or comparable in terms of size. Anyway, and so when you're tall, you may not look super large for your height, but anyway. And so all the insecure guys are gonna say that when I was sick with a high fever and virus that I was 4 inches, but I'm just God, and so I'm not insecure at all. I'm just meant to turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending, where ultimately I'm morally superior to everything around me, which is pretty dark. Anyway, and also telepathic. So anyway, a man's financial situation, intelligence, and ability to accrue resources also involve whether a woman will be involved with him, because women want at times an elevated lifestyle, and so if a man's income and intelligence enables that elevated lifestyle, then basically the woman may be involved with that man. So a long time ago, females would evolutionarily select for strong hunters who were physically impressive and could hunt. In the modern age of intellectual work, a man who is strong could be a nerd who's just very intelligent and making a good salary, and is able to offer the female then an elevated lifestyle at times. All right. So anyway, there's a curse to everything, and so if you are a male porn star, for example, your identity, your life, and your career is associated with quite profane, publicly viewable expressions of your nudity, and is viewed as a quite basic thing. And so, hey, wow, I'm Hollywood Cash. I'm this maybe 34-year-old black male. Hollywood Cash is nowhere near as thick as Julio was, and this, that, and the other, and he's just doing this thing, and then his career and life is associated with publicly viewable nudity and pornographic content. Then there's men who are doing like other careers, things they're passionate about in the sciences and technology and this, that, and the other, who don't have their life image or career associated with something as profane and vulgar as porn, and who have partners or wives and are living a happy and fulfilling life, right? And so there's a curse to everything, all right? So on. Anyway, um, so anyway, um, I'm right about everything, and so I'm God. And so thank you for the increasing subscriber count. All the insecure guys that want me to be 5. Well, the sexuality speech already blew up, where I mentioned, roughly my peak size, and then in the description amended any information that was inaccurate, and so that's already blown up to over 8,000 viewers and nearly 30 likes. And so the information about my true peak size is already popular, and nothing can stop that now. So anyway, this has been Deus Ex Machina, manifestation of God, morally superior to all of you, who will turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending. Please subscribe to the channel. I can do everything. Ultimately, you can watch me doing everything. I'm multi-talented. You can watch me playing Clair de Lune by Debussy, impersonating Childish Gambino singing Earn, and also Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole, dancing like Michael Jackson, doing soccer tricks, and then martial arts. In Peace Through Strength, this was not my song choice. A Czech woman was playing music in the background. And so the song that was playing is He Is Sailing, which talks about the coming of a king or a messiah. And that king or messiah has a ship. Anyway, and so basically, it says all the souls he to touch, millions and millions, and so on and so forth, about this savior or king. And so ultimately, in the start it says, weakest and strongest will dance in delight, all illuminous our savior, they bring him forth. And so I actually am your savior, the Deus Ex Machina, who is God in manifest human form, ultimately who is theologically correct, espousing the truth of non-benevolent deism, and I'm right about everything I say. Anyway, but ultimately, the truth content of what I say is nearly 100%. For me to claim, even as God, that every single bit of information I say is 100% correct is nearly impossible. Anyway, and so ultimately, what is repeated in that thing, the Peace Through Strength martial art video, is the repeating verse, "Our true kingdom come." This was completely unplanned, but basically, as I run up and do the flying kick, the word correspondent with my reaching mid-air maximal extension in the flying kick, with maximally extended kicking leg, and maximally tucked non-kicking leg, is the word king. And so basically, at the 26-second timestamp, you can find the frame where my kicking leg is maximally extended and my non-kicking leg is maximally tucked. That precise frame corresponds with the word king. And so from 25-second mark to 26-second mark, the song says, "Our true king," with the frame terminating at the 26-second mark, corresponding to the word king, where I am at a sort of peak extension in the flying kick. Non-kicking leg is perfectly tucked, kicking leg is perfectly extended, parallel to the ground. That happened by irony, and it's completely coincidental. Then you resume the video from that pause point, and so then you'll hear "Dumb come," all right. And so basically, from 25-second mark to 26-second mark is "Our true king," with king at peak flying kick extension. Then you resume the video, you'll hear "Dumb come." And so the actual repeated verse is again, "Our true kingdom come." All this happened, ironically, and so on. Now, the video of me filming all the flags of the world, saying that I'll be worshipped the world over, has over 100,000 views. Then my speech has over 8,000. And some of my other content has blown up. Now, the correct theology is non-benevolent deism. Now, ultimately, the machine that is running this is ironic, and free will is an open question. And so that I am at peak flying kick extension, correspondent with the phrase "our true king," was unplanned. Anyway, am I your true king? Only time will tell. This has been Deus Ex Machina. Please subscribe to the channel.